So here we go. Like I said, welcome to another episode of Chain Driven. Today is just going to be me riding through the woods. I'll try and make this one a little more interesting. I always wondered why so many people had dual vlogs. Now I know why. Because listening to one person is boring as shit. Today I'm practicing wheelies a little bit. I'm practicing covering the rear brake and trying to use as much body positioning to pop up the front and using this little... Ow, that hurt. Okay, I got a stick. Okie doke, we already picked up a hitchhiker. You get out of here. Okay, here we go. Like I said, so wheelies. When I was younger, I never really practiced wheelies because I didn't think they were useful for much. However, I realize now that it's an important skill to learn in a safe and productive manner. That wasn't a good one. So one of the things you can see there is that I used too much power and spun the rear tire, kicking the back out sideways, making the bike go off course basically. So what I'm trying to do is to really use a lot of body movement to load the front shocks and then pull back up, making it relatively easy to pop up the front tire on almost any bike. It even works on my DR200 if you time everything perfectly. I'm still not very good at it. And I have flipped the bike over a couple of times, so I'm quite nervous to go super high. Again, which is why it's important to practice this sort of, controlled area. And so I like to go slow, pop the front tire up, maybe carry it for a little bit, drop it back down. I'm trying to always remember, pop it down with the rear brake. Trying to train my brain to hit the rear brake when I get too high as opposed to just jumping off the bike. Even if you go too high and you hit the rear brake, you can pull the front tire back if you have a little bit of speed. So the best thing I can say is if you're going to practice wheelies, practice covering the rear brake. Trying to make it basically a habit for when I need it. And so one thing I like to do is to mentally rehearse what I'm going to do. So I never used to practice wheelies for a couple of reasons. First of all, because I tried it a few times and then flipped my bike a few times, and so I got quite nervous. I didn't realize there was much of a useful skill behind it. I thought it was just something you would do to show off. But the more I ride, the more I realize that it is a useful skill, especially in things like hill climbs, where if you have a really steep hill and you have a really good sense of balance, you will likely not flip your bike quite as much as someone who doesn't, because you'll be able to sense and feel when your bike is at that tipping point and stay at or below that level. Again, you can see I don't always get it up. Again, generally that's because I'm not loading enough and then pulling back and up on the front handlebars. The one risk with practicing this over and over, which I can tell you about extensively, is overuse injury to your wrist and or forearm. If you spend 3 or 4 hours practicing this, your arms are probably going to hurt unless you're in unbelievable shape. Or you've probably got really good technique. Sure, some of my vloggers out there could do this all day and not have a problem. I'm looking at you, Jake the Garden Snake, the Wheelie Master. So again, load the front, pop the back. No real issue. I tend not to get too high again. most of my wheelies I do to go over little areas and that kind of stuff, rather than to show off. Jake the garden snake could have his front tire fall off and he'd still be able to get home just wheeling the entire way. I cannot do that. Would I like to? Yeah. One of the things I practice is balance, and the wheelie gives you a different balance feel because it's forward and backwards as opposed to side and side. Again, if you can wheel your bike on sand, you're probably getting closer and closer to really loading and using your weight properly. Because again, if your rear tire doesn't have much traction, you really have to have good technique in order to get that front tire out. Again, today is Sunday. Probably lots of people out, so I'm being a little cautious, so please excuse my lack of speed. In my last video, I talked about the pros and cons of the KTM 690. I love the bike, it's amazing. Some people written to me said that there seem to be more cons than pros, but really, it's an amazing bike. It does everything really, really well. But, you know, there are a few things like any bike you have to fix. I would say the single biggest problem I had with this bike is that this mirror rattles. At a certain RPM, it rattles, and I have no idea how to fix that. I've had the mirror apart 3 or 4 times. I've changed the height, I've changed the tension, I've changed everything. There's nothing broken in the mirror. But at a certain RPM, it rattles quite loudly. So most of you can say, well, the simple solution is double take mirrors, put them on, forget about it. That will probably be one of my next steps. So one of the things about properly wheeling your bike means that you can do it in really, really poor conditions. So my technique, which I've learned from watching extensive moto vloggers, basically Jake the Garden Snake, who can really unbelievably well. The guy could friggin' lose the front tire off his bike and still ride it home just wheeling the entire way. First one is to basically power wheel it, which is what I do. I think there's pros and cons to each method. So with the power wheel, you're basically using the power of your bike to wheelie, but I like to give myself an advantage with that. This bike can wheelie no problem when you're on pavement or hard packed dirt. But to really be a great wheelier, you should be able to do it in low traction environments. And that's basically if you're in loose dirt or sand, if you load the front suspension by just hammering down on it and then bouncing back up and pulling up on the suspension, you can make it very easy to wheelie. This has a few advantages because again, you can do it, you know, in sand, you can do it when it's slippery, whenever it's wet, and it can really make it easier to pop up a bike with almost any power. Using this technique, I can wheelie the DR200. It's obviously not quite as easy, but it's still possible, and that bike has got no power. Going uphill is obviously a little easier than going down. Single moto vlogs are a little boring, but hopefully you might learn something with me today. So if you like it, subscribe for more if you want. Until next time, stay driven.